Sumeena, I just absolutely loved your chapter, Doing It for Generations. And before we talk any further, I actually would like to pose a question about the title itself. Doing It for Generations is means a lot. It's so powerful. It's said so much without really using a lot of words. Can you get into the gist of what have we been doing for generations and why you chose to write what you wrote and why you chose this particular topic, this particular title, if you will?
Yeah, of course, Cam. Thank you. So, the reason I wrote my story was obviously this is a collaboration of amazing stories from all over the world. And when the readers read the book, they'll see so many themes and lessons and just aha moments coming out. But one thing that always strikes me about hearing someone's story is how it can change things. And, just learning from someone's experiences, from their whatever they've been through, we can soak that in and then we can actually change things in the future, not make the same mistakes they made, maybe not, have the same hurdles or deal with hurdles in a different way. So I learn in my life that sometimes I see the same patterns repeating from, for example, my mother's had certain patterns that she dealt with and she was dealing with the same ones as a mother. And I realized when I became a mom, it was really too easy for me to repeat those patterns again. And they weren't always good, they weren't always positive. So I became very aware that I wanted to make a change in my children's future. And I realized very quickly that means that generations of future will change. Those patterns will change. There'll be so many things that are broken. And it's kind of become an obsession of mine now where I'm just like, is this something that's going to be really bad further down the line? Is this a limiting belief? Is this something that's going to be a negative? And let's break that pattern now so that my daughters and son can have a different experience, and then their daughters and sons can have a different experience. And therefore, generations will change. So it's more about changing future generations than past. Obviously, when we change things, we are changing the future. And so now, how that seeps into my work, and this has only happened as I've grown older and become more aware of it, is every time I work with a woman and I'm helping them start their business, I don't just do it to help them start a business and make money. I know that they are then going to change so many beliefs. They're going to impact their children, their society, the world. And so I want to be part of that change of future generations. And that's where I get, all of that motivation from. And that's where the title came from. So I hope that speaks to the question that you asked.
Absolutely, absolutely. It doesn't just speak to me. I'm sure it speaks to numerous women out there who are reading this and kind of wants to change the narrative for the future generations to come. The,
Yes. Yeah.
there was a line that you wrote in the book that really hit home for me, and it said that, we grow up with this belief that women are weak and men rule. And it's not a belief, it's something that we see in an Indian household much more probably than others. I can only speak
Mhm.
to an Indian household because I grew up with those. And it's not something that is said or verbalized a lot, but it is an experience. It is
Mm.
like it's not, it's the unsaid that sets the roles, that men are in the position of power. It's them coming home and asking, go make a cup of tea, or them coming home and directing women to what to do, yet the role reversal is never seen or experienced. Or I would say it has yet to be seen in the capacity that it could, where you really
Mm.
feel yourself as an equal.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, what role do we as mothers play in shaping our daughters' beliefs without actually verbalizing? It's one thing to say something and the other thing to be in that role, because we learn a lot from not what is told to us but what we see around us.
Yeah.
So what can we as mothers do so our
Yeah.
daughters experience a different reality?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, to be honest. That's the number one question. And I'm glad that you asked that question reading my chapter, because that's the question I would want any woman reading that chapter, especially a mother. But you don't have to be a mother. You can be an aunt, you can be a friend, you can be a sister. I would want them to ask themselves that question: what can I do? Because we can all do something, however empowered or or unempowered we feel, 100% we have the opportunity and obligation. So I do want to just unpick a little bit your question, because it is about the patriarchy, and that's not a word that I heard until very late in my life. And when I heard that word and really understood what it meant, I grew up in a 100% patriarchal society. Even though I grew up in England, it was all around me, and it is not just Indian families actually, Cam. This is what I've learned through my research and my reading. The whole world is very dominated by a patriarchal society. There's very few matriarchal societies. In fact, I think the Native American culture is matriarchal, which is so interesting. But globally, it is men who rule the roost. And as women, we're expected to mold to that. And the untapped potential that women have, because of this is unbelievable. And it comes from fear. It just comes from men being so fearful of females' power. So there is a lot that I've read around the divine feminine, around some of the wounds that we have, and some of those are that we're carrying generation after generation. And there's an awesome book called Patriarchal Stress Disorder that speaks to this, and it's so good. I would recommend everybody reads that, especially if you're interested in changing things, because it allows us to realize this is not about necessarily our individual experience in this life, but it's the generational experience that has changed our DNA as women and our reactions therefore. So from a very young age as little girls, and we just respond differently to the fear of men and the patriarchal society, because it's in our blood. So there's really good research in science in there about this. But answering your question in particular about what we can do as women is we can demonstrate, obviously, behaviors that our daughters and girls around us can see, and make it okay to say things like no, or I don't want to do that, or create boundaries, really good boundaries around us that protect us from things that make us unhappy and uncomfortable. And start realizing that it's okay to not be liked and not be called the good girl and not always be the one who makes everyone around them happy at the sake of our own happiness. And realizing that you're not going to get burnt at the stake or shunned into the, out of the village, which may have happened a few hundred years ago. And that's what I'm talking about, the wounds that we carry. We still feel that internally, oh my gosh, we're going to be outcasted. But if they see us, I mean, I know myself, I'm very clear about my boundaries. And with my husband, we have a very equal relationship because of that. But I've worked at that, and so has he, because we both had to unpick our upbringing and everything we'd ever seen. But now I also know my daughters and my son also, by the way, it's also very important for us as mothers to impact our sons. As you can imagine, if you really want to make a change, you have to impact both. So I really take it as my duty to debrief my children and anyone who wants to hear me and say, this is why I did that, and this is how I approached it, and this is what the impact is, and this is how I felt, and that's okay to feel like that. We have a line in our house which is don't dim to fit in. So I have to tell my daughters all the time, don't play small, don't make yourself dim just so everyone around you likes you. So that type of things. As mothers, we are the only ones who can actually make that change, which is why I work with women. I really just think I want to work with women. I want to help them see all of this. I want them to feel the power and really make find good financial decisions so they feel that they can be a change. Does
Beautiful.
that answer your question?
Absolutely, Sumina. And that actually beautifully segues into my other question, because I'm so glad you brought your son into the mix, that it's not just our daughters we have to teach,
Mm,
it's our sons as well. And my
yes.
thought was that any change does not happen with one person or one particular gender fighting for it. I think
Yes.
the bigger thing is we need to enroll men as our allies in this fight. We need them to actually realize that this is an issue, and that's an issue that's close to
Yes.
their heart, and that they need to be a part and parcel of it if indeed change were to happen, because we cannot build walls and work in silos and expect things to change, because for a society to work, both men and women need to really realize that this is the right solution. So what steps can we take to And I'm sure a lot of it is beliefs that they have grown up with. Like they're not
Yeah,
thinking and internalizing when I'm asking my wife to do X, Y, and Z, I'm overpowering her, because they don't know any different, right? So how
absolutely.
do you enroll the men in your life to be the allies and not follow the same narrative of that men are the rulers and women are weak?
Yeah.
What can they do?
Thank Thank you so much, Cam, for asking this question, because I had to work so hard at this, because I was carrying a lot of negativity about men from my childhood, about, the way that I had been restricted, or the way that I was not allowed to make decisions. And I would have carried on with that bitterness if I had not pulled myself up and got help. To be honest, I got a coach. I had a life coach for a while, and she really made me see some of my thinking patterns. And we have to speak up. We have to tell people what your actions are having this impact on me. And we have to go in with the thought they are doing the best with what they know. So, we all know, like, for example, my father, he was brought up in a certain way. He maybe doesn't know any different. So, therefore, I have an obligation to help him a little bit to see the other way. If he says something and it's hurtful, or if he does something and it's not really landing well with me or with my children, for example, my daughters, I gently pull him up, because he's just doing the best with what he knows. So if we go in with that thinking, that allows us to open a dialogue and just say, that isn't landing well, that doesn't feel good, rather than going into what we often do as women, passive aggressive behavior. And passive aggressive is just leads to more of a spiral, downhill spiral. So with my husband, like, of course he came from a certain background, and we've been married 25 years, and we have an amazing, very, very equal marriage. In fact, we've both run businesses together for almost 15 years, and now I'm starting another business on my own. We're 50-50 in our household. Often my children laugh that he cooks way more than I ever do, and he does way more domestic duties than I do. And that is so okay. He doesn't take it as, a deflation of his ego, and I don't see it as like any sort of dominance. But we talked about it. We talked about it a lot. We worked at it. I had to say things if I felt that something wasn't right, rather than going to passive aggressive, which I have done, and it doesn't work. It just leads to more tension. It just leads to days and days of not talking. So just sitting at a time which is right, obviously not in the heat of the moment, and having a real good discussion about what that feeling was, why you're doing something. Can we change the way we think about this? Can we change the way we approach this? Things start to break and patterns start to change, and that's where it starts to become better. So that's what I would do. I would start opening a dialogue in a very in a way that is received really well.
That's beautiful. And it was one of the questions I was going to ask about getting the boys involved, getting the men involved, and women play, I suppose, the pivotal role there, because as when children are born, they know their mothers, they know their fathers as well, but in some way we're the nurturers and we're bringing them up, and so it's up to us to mold them into a
Yeah.
society that respects women. And this is what I've done. I've got two daughters and a son, and it's always been that respect your sisters, love your sisters, but all three of you are equal. There's no that the boy is better, and the traditional Indian family which says the boy eats first and the girls second. There's nothing like that. That's all gone. What I wanted to ask you there, and you answered that beautifully, is there's a lot of women today, young and older generation, who are in this flux and in this kind of duality, because they are living a life where the male is dominant, yet they know in their heads that's not really right, and they must change society. They must evolve, and let the men evolve with them, because it's together that we make society. No one is, like you say, it's all got to be 50-50. When did you realize, because you've put in some beautiful aspects about you and your mother, and then your own daughter, and the grandmother, the generational thing, which is so beautifully put. Where and how would you tell our readers who are reading your story and who are in this flux about how to recognize that if they're not stepping out of it, but they feel that constriction that, I want to, but I can't? How do they go about it and step out of that duality?
Yeah. Shoma, that is a really tough question because everybody is so different. And I know that everyone, for example, if you're a young girl and you're in a very male dominated household, it can be very hard to have a voice. But I would say that if you really focus in on yourself and know that what you are about and you strengthen that as much as you can, whether that takes, reading something, watching YouTube videos, finding yourself a mentor or peers, or reading books like this one. That's why I was so on board with this project, because it's just, this is exactly what we need to get into the hands of people who are like, I know there's something, but I just can't tap into it right now. Strengthen your inner self, because you will have your chance. You will have your opportunity to be in control and start making the change. So before I was 18, I didn't feel that. I was very much under my parents' supervision. I wasn't even really allowed to go to university. And that's the first time I took a big stand. And I said, I'm going. There's just something clicked in me or broke. I don't know which one. And I just said, no, I'm going. This is enough. Like, I've done what I had to do till now. I'm 18. I'm going to uni. This is my dream. And obviously after that, you leave home and things start to change. But I'm glad that I didn't go off the rails. I used that change in a very good way, and I was able to build myself a life. And ever since that day when I was 18, Shomo, I have stopped asking for permission. I've done things without really asking anybody if it's right or wrong. I've tapped into myself and asked myself, is this right or wrong for me? And I will live with the consequences either way. I'm okay. I don't want 20 people's opinion that I don't really respect. So anyone reading this, however old you are, if you're 14 or if you're, 60, start deciding for yourself that I am going to strengthen my inner self. I'm going to start understanding what my decisions are. A lot of the speakers who've come on, and I hope everyone listens to all the interviews, you'll hear this common theme that we all decide that at some point, we all decide to start listening to ourselves. And that's where I think, Shoma, that you can start deciding, this is how I can start making the change in a small way, in my little decisions for myself, which then later become bigger decisions as you become freer.
Absolutely. And and this, we talked about this at another interview with, and our readers will know that, is once you take that step, people respect you.
Yes.
People actually, it's the opposite of what you think, that you think you're being rebellious, but when you stand up for yourself, people back off and they respect that. And that's such a freeing feeling that, oh my God, I've done this and people really look up to me. You're not a doormat anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think, this book, The Wings of a Woman, is that. It's talking about growing those wings and, being able to come into your own with everyone's support, not by being aggressive or being, like you said, falling off the rails, but bringing everybody together. And I think that's so, so powerful.
And I think I would like to add to that it's not about growing your wings. It's about working hard to build your wings. Like, we weren't born with golden wings, if you will. We worked at it. We worked to build our wings. And I think I love that thought that you will be respected once you stand up and take action than actually being passive. And I see a lot of women actually feeling that, my story is my story. I'm in this situation. That's okay. I live it. But my daughter's story will be different, or her daughter's story will be different. And it's really important to realize that, yes, take action now, because that's the first step towards making your daughter's story different. Unless you take that first step, you are letting her absorb today's reality, and that's not important. And Sumeena, you beautifully said, don't let fear hold you yet. And you'll be respected if you stand up for yourself.
Yeah. And adding to that, both of you, I would just like to say that at some point, we have to decide whose opinions and whose respect counts and whose doesn't. and there will be casualties along the way, and that is okay. And so many of the stories in this book speak about that, how at some point we had to make decisions that those people do not serve me, and that I have to move on from that because they're being selfish. And Kahil Gibran has a beautiful poem about this, where he talks about how parents, our job is to let our children go. We're the bow and they're the arrow. And I have tapped into that poem since I was very young because I needed
Yeah.
it. I needed it. Have you got it? You probably got the book.
Yeah, I'm sitting with Khalil Gibran.
You have every book under the sun, Shoma. I have used that poem a lot of times to help me when I felt doubt that, oh, what am I doing? Am I going to, break ties here? I have actually managed to not lose any relationships in my life, but still keep my boundaries. But that's because, like you said, once you start, people around you, they're like, oh, okay, I either figure out how to work with this, or I'm going to lose her.
Yeah.
And that is okay. If they're willing to take that risk, that's okay. Doesn't mean that we have to change completely. So if anyone hasn't read that poem, just go find it. It really helps strengthen that inner resolve that we are supposed to be bows and going out into the world as people, and people shouldn't hold us back. So, that's, yeah.
Beautifully put, yeah.
Sumeena, as a closing question, I'd like to ask you, there are all these, are there any positive values? Are there any positive traditions? Are there any positive cultural influences that have been passed on for generations to come and that you would like to actually pass on to your daughters as well? I mean, we all talked about the narrative we'd like to change, but what about some things, some values, some things that are so core and dear to your heart that you don't want to be lost as the generations
Yeah.
go by?
Gosh, yes, there's so many actually, Cam. I'm glad you asked that question because I don't want this to be perceived as someone, like I'm like, no, break down, thousands of years of tradition and start again. I love the Hindu traditions, and actually, what makes me sad is I'm talking about Hindu because that's what I am, but all the cultures have their beautiful traditions. What makes me sad is as time goes on, a lot of those traditions are used for the wrong reasons, for control or for some sort of greed often, or to create fear. But what I do say to my kids all the time is, yes, do tap into all the spirituality that is in the Hindu culture. They read all the stories of the gods because there's so many lessons in those. I don't necessarily want them to be praying all the time or donating all their wealth to God, but I do want them to understand the Mahabharata and all of those stories, and for them to see, okay, this is where these themes come from, and these are the things that are important. And also, as family, I'm very much about family life, very much. I changed my career. I quit my corporate job so I could raise my girls, not only my girls, sorry, my children, my 3 children, the way that I wanted to, and have time with my husband. So family life is very important, and I know that's a theme. And this is where I think it's quite sad, because I do believe a lot of what the traditions have been built around family life, and I'm sure all of us in this book will say that where people were coming from in their heart was a good place. It just got manifested sometimes in a very restrictive way. And that's where I feel empathy comes in, where we just say, I know where that's coming from. Like, for example, my parents, I know where that strictness or that fear or that restriction, I know where it's coming from. But now listen to my side of things. We don't need that anymore. So I am pretty strict with my girls. They're not allowed to do whatever they want, but I understand. I try to even explain it to them. This is why we don't want you to do this. And so it's a conversation, not just like dictatorship or authority.
Yeah, and I loved it when you put it in your story, and readers will read this. And it's such a simple thing that you allow your girls to paint their nails. I mean, this is something, yeah, we were forbidden. I still love having my nails painted. And we were absolutely forbidden because my dad said that, only,
Yeah.
this is really funny, but he said, Panwalas have red nails, not girls.
Yeah, I know. It's so true.
If even at the age of 15, 16, or even now, I close my fists if I'm in front of my dad. Even reading that sentence, it was so liberating that you allow there's nothing harmful in that. Let them do what they want.
Yeah,
Have
I
a bit of
know.
fun.
And you, and so let's take that example because that is speaking to what I'm saying here. So my girls, they like to paint with nail varnish. They have kiddie nail varnish, the stuff that peels off and is not harmful. And I have to say, the first time they asked me, my initial response was no. I was like, no, we didn't do it till we were 16. You shouldn't be. And not because I was like, I didn't do it, you can't. I had that belief that it was bad. I had that belief that only certain people will nail varnish. And I had to peel that belief apart and say, why? Why is it bad? And realizing it's not. It's just not. It's just them being innocent. They're young. They want to play. They don't care. It's not to look beautiful. I mean, they do play, but it's as long as we talk about it and I say, listen, your self-worth is not about how your nails look. That doesn't make you beautiful. That doesn't make you someone give you attention. These are the things that make you who you are. And they
Exactly.
know that. So we talk about makeup, or I'll put on makeup and then they'll say, can we put on makeup? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, we know it doesn't mean that it makes us who we are. And so we kid now. And that's what I want. I want them to not have their self-belief wrapped up in, and that's where our parents were coming from, I'm sure.
Yeah.
They didn't want us to put makeup on because it brought attention and it made us think that that's what was important. And we wanted to be externally and focused, not internal. So yeah, Shoma, that's a good example of what I was trying to say. So I'm glad you picked up on that.
And yeah, and you said it really beautifully because it just hit out at me, like, and as it will to many of our readers. Yes, it's
Yeah.
a beautiful story. I think you really have a full book in there. And this is just a little snapshot of what readers are getting, because there is so much depth in those, couple of maybe 1,000 words that you've written in the book. It's just 2 pages, but you can go so much deep into each of those paragraphs. I think you've got a good book in you. And I
Thank
hope
you.
our
As with
readers like
a lot of the people who've written in this book have done a lot of writing before. And I know many of us have worked with you, Shoma, on writing our memoirs and our books. So that's what's so special about this book. It's full of people with lots of talent coming out and collaborating and telling their story, which makes it really special. No one's doing it for any other reason except for to make a change.
Yes.
But the intention behind the book is so beautiful. No one is doing it for anything like for visibility, for money or anything like that. All the money is going to charity. So, it is so much about just contributing so someone can, the one reader who's listening to this, just that one, if they read the book and they make that one change, I'm sure all of us will be so happy. We'll just celebrate.
Yeah.
You said it so beautifully, and I truly loved your chapter. It's a huge inspiration to create a new kind of a blended reality for our kids, which has all the best from our cultural values, as well as
Yeah.
having a little bit of a flex, so that they don't lose themselves within
Yeah.
that mold. So I completely love that, and I can't wait for the Wings